This is a continuation of our reading of John Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion. Number 5. But my business at present is not with that sty. I wish rather to deal with those who, led away by absurd subtleties, are inclined by giving an indirect turn to the frigid doctrine of Aristotle, to employ it for the purpose both of disproving the immortality of the soul and robbing God of his rights. Under the pretext that the faculties of the soul are organized, they chain it to the body as if it were incapable of a separate existence, while they endeavor as much as in them lies, by pronouncing eulogiums on nature, to suppress the name of God. But there is no ground for maintaining that the powers of the soul, are confined to the performance of bodily functions. What has the body to do with your measuring the heavens, counting the number of the stars, ascertaining their magnitudes, their relative distances, the rate at which they move, and the orbits which they describe? I deny not that astronomy has its use. All I mean to show is that these lofty investigations are not conducted by organized symmetry, but by the faculties of the soul itself, apart altogether from the body. The single example I have given will suggest many others to the reader. The swift and versatile movements of the soul in glancing from heaven to earth, connecting the future with the past, retaining the remembrance of former years, nay, forming creations of its own, its skill, moreover, in making astonishing discoveries and inventing so many wonderful arts, are sure indications of the agency of God in man. What shall we say of its activity when the body is asleep? Its many revolving thoughts, its many useful suggestions, its many solid arguments, nay, its presentiment of things yet to come. What shall we say but that man bears about with him a stamp of immortality which can never be effaced? But how is it possible for man to be divine and yet not acknowledge his Creator? Shall we, by means of a power of judging implanted in our breast, distinguish between justice and injustice, and yet there be no judge in heaven? Shall some remains of intelligence continue with us in sleep, and yet no God keep watch in heaven? Shall we be deemed the inventors of so many arts and useful properties that God may be defrauded of his praise, though experience tells us plainly enough that whatever we possess is dispensed to us in unequal measures by another hand? The talk of certain persons concerning a secret inspiration quickening the whole world is not only silly, but altogether profane. Such persons are delighted with the following celebrated passage of Virgil, quote, "Know first that heaven and earth's compacted frame, and flowing waters and the starry flame, and both the radiant lights, one common soul, inspires and feeds and animates the whole. This active mind, infused through all the space, unites and mingles with the mighty mass. Hence men and beasts the breath of life obtain, and birds of air and monsters of the main. The ethereal vigor is in all the same, and every soul is filled with equal flame." Unquote. The meaning of all this is that the world, which was made to display the glory of God, is its own creator. For the same poet has in another place adopted a view common to both Greeks and Latins, quote, "Hence to the bees some sages have assigned a portion of the God, the heaven and heavenly mind. For God goes forth and spreads throughout the whole, heaven, earth, and sea, the universal soul. Each at its birth, from him all beings share, both man and brute, the breath of vital air. To him return, and loosed from earthly chain, fly whence they sprung, and rest in God again. Spurn at the grave, and fearless of decay, dwell in heaven high, art star the ethereal way." Unquote. Here we see how far that jejune speculation of a universal mind animating and invigorating the world is fitted to beget and foster piety in our minds. We have a still clearer proof of this in the profane verses which the licentious Lucretius has written as a deduction from the same principle. The plain object is to form an unsubstantial deity, and thereby banish the true God whom we ought to fear and worship. I admit, indeed, that the expressions, quote, "nature is God," unquote, may be piously used, if dictated by a pious mind, but as it is inaccurate and harsh, nature being more properly the order which has been established by God, in matters which are so very important, and in regard to which special reverence is due, it does harm to confound the deity with the inferior operations of his hands. Number 6. Let each of us, therefore, in contemplating his own nature, remember that there is one God who governs all natures, and, in governing, wishes us to have respect to himself, to make him the object of our faith, worship, and adoration. Nothing, indeed, can be more preposterous than to enjoy these noble endowments which bespeak the divine presence within us, and to neglect him who, of his own good pleasure, bestows them upon us. In regard of his power, how glorious the manifestations by which he urges us to the contemplation of himself, unless, indeed, we pretend not to know whose energy it is that by a word sustains the boundless fabric of the universe, at one time making heaven reverberate with thunder, sending forth the scorching lightning, and setting the whole atmosphere in a blaze, at another causing the raging tempests to blow, and forthwith in one moment, when it so pleases him, making a perfect calm, keeping the sea, which seems constantly threatening the earth with devastation, suspended as it were in air, at one time lashing it into fury by the impetuosity of the winds, at another appeasing its rage and stilling all its waves. Here we might refer to those glowing descriptions of divine power as illustrated by natural events which occur throughout Scripture, but more especially in the book of Job and the prophecies of Isaiah. These, however, I purposely omit, because a better opportunity of introducing them will be found when I come to treat of the scriptural account of the creation. I only wish to observe here that this method of investigating the divine perfections by tracing the lineaments of his countenance as shadowed forth in the firmament and on the earth is common both to those within and to those without the pale of the church. From the power of God we are naturally led to consider his eternity, since that from all other things derive their origin must necessarily be self-existent and eternal. Moreover, if it be asked what cause induced him to create all things at first, and now inclines him to preserve them, we shall find that there could be no other cause than his own goodness. But if this is the only cause, nothing more should be required to draw forth our love towards him. Every creature, as the psalmist reminds us, participating in his mercy, quote, his tender mercies are over all his works, unquote. Psalm 145, verse 9. Number 7. In the second class of God's works, namely those which are above the ordinary course of nature, the evidence of his perfections are in every respect equally clear. For in conducting the affairs of men, he so arranges the course of his providence as daily to declare, by the clearest manifestations, that though all are in innumerable ways the partakers of his bounty, the righteous are the special objects of his favor, the wicked and profane the special objects of his severity. It is impossible to doubt his punishment of crimes, while at the same time he, in no unequivocal manner, declares that he is the protector and even the avenger of innocents, by shedding blessings on the good, helping their necessities, soothing and solacing their griefs, relieving their sufferings, and in all ways providing for their safety. And though he often permits the guilty to exult for a time with impunity, and the innocent to be driven to and fro in adversity, nay, even to be wickedly and iniquitously oppressed, this ought not to produce any uncertainty as to the uniform justice of all his procedure. Nay, an opposite inference should be drawn. When any one crime calls forth visible manifestations of his anger, it must be because he hates all crimes, and, on the other hand, his leaving many crimes unpunished only proves that there is a judgment in reverse, when the punishment now delayed shall be inflicted. In like manner, how richly does he supply us with the means of contemplating his mercy when, as frequently happens, he continues to visit miserable sinners with unwearied kindness, until he subdues their depravity, and woos them back with more than a parent's fondness.